In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to locate a source on an astronomical image. I've got this image queued up and ready to go, and I'm going to use AstroImageJ to open it up. So this is an image of G239, and this was an object, a white dwarf, that I got from a list, and I sent the coordinates to a telescope in New Mexico, which took images, and I got a whole bunch of images back, including this one of this white dwarf. And I'd like to know which of the objects in this image is the white dwarf, and that's what I want to show you how to do today. So an easy way to do that is to go to this astronomical database called SIMBAD. And this database allows you to give it some information about the object, and it will tell you something about that object. So this is G200-39. And I'm doing an identifier query, which means that I'm telling this database the name of the object. If I knew something else, like the coordinates where the object was, then I could put that in. And I do know those coordinates, but I've decided to go with the name. So here we go. I'm going to submit the ID. And right away, this great page comes up that tells me quite a bit of information. This is a high proper motion star, which means that this object is moving relatively quickly as compared to background stars. Most stars are very far away, and so we don't notice them moving relative to each other. This one is more nearby, and therefore we can see it moving relative to other stars. So this means that if you took an image once a year for 10 years, you might actually see the star move relative to the background stars. And I'm calling it a star because this says it's a high proper motion star, but this is actually a white dwarf that we're looking at. You can also read off the magnitude or the brightness in a number of different filters. There are coordinates provided in different coordinate systems. And what I really wanted to show you is this nice image over here on the right-hand side of the panel that gives us some information about where this thing is located relative to the stars around it. And that's going to be really handy when we're trying to locate this object on the frame. It's a little bit difficult to see this, and so I can just expand this panel and then I get a nice big picture of it. There's some cool stuff in here. There's a galaxy. There's some interesting colors represented. Down here in the left-hand corner, you can see that the field of view that is being represented here is around 8 arc minutes. Now, remember that 60 arc minutes represent 1 degree. And that will help you to get a sense of how big this field is. So you can zoom in and out. And to give you some context, the camera at Phillips Academy captures about 30 arc minutes, or half a degree. And that's about what we have here. And the camera that took the picture that I showed you a minute ago captures a little bit wider field of view. So I'm struggling here. This thing is very sensitive, but I will try to go to around 40 arc minutes. There we go. That's pretty good. I want to see both windows at the same time, so I'm going to move this one over. And now what I would like you to do is take a look at the bright stars in this image and take a look at the bright stars in this image and see if you can notice any similarities. Typically, what I like to do is look for the brighter stars in each of the images and see if I can make a quick match. And here I'm noticing 1, 2, 3 bright stars. And over here, I'm noticing that these 3 are the brightest stars in the image. And so I'm thinking that this triangle and this triangle are probably the same. Now, one of the things that can happen with these images is that they're not necessarily oriented in the same way, and they can be both rotated and flipped compared to each other. And so it's not just enough to recognize a big triangle, you've got to go a little bit further than that. So what I would do next is I would notice probably something like this little triangle here. So above this bright star there are these 2. And when I come over here, I can see those same bright stars, but do you notice how they're not oriented in the same way? And based on what I'm seeing here, I think that these images are flipped relative to each other. So if I had the ability to flip one image over the x-axis, they would actually look pretty similar. And in Astro Image J, it is possible to do that. If you go to, let's see here. There it is. If you go to View, Invert X, it will flip the image over the x-axis, and now you see, okay, this triangle and this triangle are oriented pretty similarly. I've got these two down here, and the next thing I would do is I would start checking a few more stars. Like I see this pattern here, I see this pattern here, and I'm starting to really gain confidence that I've got some pattern recognition in these images. And then I can go back over here, and this little green cross is showing me the object that I put into the SIMBAD search query. And I see this line here, and I see this line here. And so I'm pretty confident that this is the object I'm looking for. And so that's it. At this point, I would probably go back in and flip back over the x-axis. I don't really like to leave my images flipped, but actually I don't think it unflipped it. Let me try that again. Oh, I know what I have to do. Invert none. That'll take me back, and I can still see this is the object. Now, you may notice that this little guy turned out to be right at the center of the field of view, and that's by design. Typically the telescope will do its best to put the object that you're imaging right in the center of the field of view, but of course it could have been this one or this one or this one. So you need to make sure that you do your due diligence and you figure out exactly which object it is that you are interested in. But probably the next thing I would do is I would maybe take a screenshot of this and use some kind of a markup tool to make a note of which object is G200-39, so that later on when I've got 4 or 5 objects and I'm, maybe I don't have this star field memorized, I can easily go back and reference that marked up image and know exactly which one I'm looking at. The other thing is the telescope will not always put the object right at the center of the field of view. And so if you have, but it might be nearby, so maybe it'll be over here or something. And if you have a marked up image and you know exactly where the object is on one image, you can usually recognize some stars in the field, even if the set of images is offset from where you typically see it. And so you can usually sort it out. So that's about all I have to tell you about this process. And I guess I would encourage you to pick an image of a different object and try this method. Go to SIMBAD, put in the object identifier, and see if you can recognize the star field and pick out the object of interest.